Ayan, ayan. Kamusta? Diyan pa ba kayo? Alam ko, hindi ako forewarning masyado na mag-meta tayo ngayon. Akala niya, nakalimutan ko na kayo, no? May hinahabol tayo mga trabaho at kung ano-ano. Of course, nagsisimula na yung balikatan exercises sa pagitan ng Pilipinas at Amerika. Kaya may mga interviews tayo with some international media among others. And then yun nga, medyo kahapon na sobrahan yung exercise natin and all. Pagod tayo gumising. Kaya ngayon, sabi ko, habol ako, gawa tayo ng konting meta. Some of you may have seen it. Actually, kagabi, nandun ako. Medyo matagal yun eh. Meron kami interview sa CNN Philippines with Rizalito David, yung isa sa mga vice presidential candidates. At yung pinag-usapan dyan, kasama din si Congressman Fortun from Agusan and mga others na sumali dyan sa mga discussion namin kahapon sa CNN Philippines. Yun nga, it's good to be back in studio. Been a while, no? At yung pinag-usapan na issue dito is, ano ba yung game plan ng opposition slash alternative candidates? Kasi kung totoo yung mga surveys suggesting that Bongbong Marcos could get the majority, then ang tanong dito is how to make the race more competitive as we enter essentially the final stretch. So I think by April we're already in the final stretch, no? So yun yung issue ngayon. At of course, may mga candidates like Mr. David who are saying na dapat talaga mag-withdraw na yung iba, or if hindi mag-withdraw ng iba, yung iba dapat effectively mag-withdraw but they can still stay in the race but endorse someone else. I don't know how that works. But parang the idea there is that eto na yung time na mag-unify yung ibang alternative candidates. But before going into that, kasi I'm gonna say a number of things na it's not gonna be the most exciting things to listen to. At alam ko may mga naiinis na sa atin dahil we have to keep giving reminders na we have to be realistic, we have to deal with things as they are, not as how we wish them to be. But before going there, at baka atake na naman tayo for sasabihin nila, ito na naman, nagpo-pontificate na naman to si Darian. Tama naman parati yung mga sinasabi natin, yung mga kulang sa ganito, ganyan eh. Before that, pag-usapan natin shortly yung sitwasyon sa Ukraine. Mukhang nag-withdraw na talagang mga Russian troops, at least from the suburbs of Kiev and some of the northern areas of Ukraine. According to isang top official ng Russia, habang may mga peace negotiations and discussion ngayon sa Turkey, kasi in fairness naman doon sa tatay ng Turkey, si Recep Tayyip Erdogan, he's using his good relations with both sides to actually really mediate this dispute in the best way possible. So in fairness naman sa Turkey, even though they're a NATO country, they act quite very neutral, no? So mukhang the peace negotiations are moving in a certain direction that indicates not a breakthrough, but that Russia is beginning to accept na mukhang hindi talaga nag-work yung kanilang plan. I mean, a month in, the Russians are talagang grabe yung military nila. Yung military nila is bleeding right and left. Dami lang tanks na nawala, armored vehicle na nawala. Thousands, if not tens of thousands of their troops have been either part of the casualties or nag-surrender. Even Russia umamin na ilan libo sa kanila ay namatay na. And actually, again, invaders are invaders and there's no justification for that. At the same time, you feel for these kids, these conscripts who were just pushed into the military and they were given the false pretext na it's a cakewalk, and now grabe yung nakita nila sa Ukraine, talagang bugbog yung invading forces dun sa Javelin anti-tank systems at saka yung mga ibang military techniques ng mga Ukrainians, no? Grabe yung mga special forces training nila. At nalaman ko pala, ayan na, pagod na tayo. Nalaman ko pala, ayan, social distance naman tayo, wala naman cyber, wala naman sana cyber COVID. Nalaman din natin na actually ginagamit ng mga ibang Ukrainians yung Javelin na anti-tank, actually for even night vision. Kasi meron siyang technology na night vision eh. Kaya kawawa talaga yung mga ibang yung mga kabataan lang na nakisali lang, na conscript lang dyan sa Russian army. Kaya yan, we don't even know nasan yung defense minister nila. So, for me, more on the clear indication dito is Russia is beginning to accept the reality na the mission failed in a sense that they're not gonna get the easy win they were looking for. Now, of course, what can come after that, ibang usapan yan. Sabi nga ni Reagan, trust but verify. In this case, mistrust, andyan, but you still have to try to negotiate something and try to verify kung ano ba talagang plano ng mga Russians. Baka naman tactical retreat lang yan, then mamaya may gagawin na sila. But there are indications that Russia is trying to minimize now yung nagda-damage control sila and might try to minimize yung theater of operations. So there are a number of issues that are being under that are under negotiation. Kasama dyan yung neutrality status ng Ukraine. Effectively, Ukraine giving up its bid to join NATO, so dapat baguhin nila yung saligang batas nila. And Zelensky suggested that might take a year or so kasi they have to ratify it, has to go through the parliament, etc. But also, Russia is asking for de facto recognition of annexation of Crimea. Medyo malabo yan. And I think medyo mas malabo pa yung issue ng sa Donetsk, no? Tsaka Luhansk and those areas na may mga pro-Russian rebel groups na take over with Russian backing, no? So, will Ukraine accept just losing those parts of its territory? Mukhang malabo yan, especially when they're doing so well conventionally. So, nakita natin talaga dito yung limits of conventional warfare, limits ng Russian power. And, if you're Taiwan, a lot of countries, you're looking at this, looking at Ukrainians' very successful resistance, medyo encouraged ka. So, in a sense, the underdog are doing very, very well ngayon sa Europe. And mukhang yung invading forces ngayon, they have to do recalibration. Again, nothing is certain. While negotiations are going, actually Mariupol and certain areas of Ukraine are still facing horrific bombardment among others based on the reports we're seeing. Everyone is skeptical, but at the same time, everyone is hoping that something will come out of this. Now, balikan natin ang Pilipinas. So, kung maalala nyo, last year, meron One Sambayan. And the whole point behind One Sambayan was to make sure na magkakaroon ng unified ticket yung mga alternative opposition / basta whoever is not admin or with Tatay or with BBM, etc. Nakita natin that the One Sambayan efforts was reaching an interesting turn when there were discussions that Lenny, Isko, and Pacquiao could come up with kind of a unified team. Now, sino mag-adjust, yun yung parating issue. But I know for a fact that there were backdoor negotiations. I have been in conversations with multiple people. I've been involved in this from multiple sides. And then, of course, hindi nag-work yan. So later on, you had Senator Lacson suggesting that, sige, takpo tayong lahat, and then mamaya, tingnan natin kung sino yung pinakamagaling mataas na surveys at yung iba, wala naman momentum, pwede na sila mag-withdraw. So you had multiple suggestions and multiple attempts for unified tickets sa opposition, hindi nag-work. No? Habang kung titignan mo naman yung administration, napakagaling nung ginawang strategy nila mga Arroyo and Romualdez, etc. to bring the House of Duterte and House of Marcos together. At least the Sara wing of the House of Duterte and the Marcos together. Kaya nagkaroon sila ng unified ticket last November. We didn't see that unification happening on the other side. And that is why we see what we see, no? Because if you look at the numbers of BBM, it's really not just a BBM number. A lot of that is Sarah's numbers. A lot of that is the, what Aristotle calls, the sum is bigger than its parts. So nung nagsama yung Marcos and House of Marcos and House of Duterte, yung multiplier effect nun, yung impact level nun, yung impact niya sa mga bandwagoners, etc. ay napakalaki. Kaya instead of going up to 40% lang, mukhang lumaki pa from that, no? While at the same time, yung kabila, very divided. Now, this is it. Mag-April na on Friday, right? So, ang tanong, anong petsa na, di ba? Because if current trend lines continue, the opposition is essentially sleepwalking into 2019, right? And nakita naman natin yung nangyari sa 2019, which is nakita natin it was a Monday night massacre. That's how I try to describe it. Grabe yung nangyari. So, they could walk into another 2019 situation unless something radical happens. But this is where problems have been emerging, no? This is where problems have been emerging. Napagod na naman tayo. Una-una, collective action problem. So kung nag-aaral kayo sa university or pwede nyo i-Wikipedia yan, collective action problem is kung saan ang hirap mag-coordinate ng iba't ibang sides while they have some common interest, meron din silang divergent interests. No? So kung saan, minsan, dahil sa divergent interest, yung common interest ay nakakalimutan. So what are these divergent interests? Which brings me to the second level. No, may mga candidates dyan, I think for instance Senator Lacson, you could say kung saan they're not only thinking about these elections. I mean, if they withdraw here, they will disappoint a lot of their comrades, a lot of their supporters, and that could actually come back and bite them, or at least this is the perception, after the elections. So it's one thing to lose these elections. It's another thing to lose these elections and also lose your base. Because you have to think about the day after. Kaya nga, ang kutob natin, Senator Lacson is gonna stick it through, right? And I think the same thing applies to other candidates, yung palabra de honor supposedly sa mga donors, sa mga supporters na if they withdraw, then disappointment yan. And later on, that could actually come back to bite them. Not only them not winning the presidency, but actually them also struggling to get support if later on they want to run for higher office. There's a third element. It is possible that some of the other candidates are rather thinking about negotiating a kind of post-elections, who knows, cabinet position under the next administration. Maybe under Bongbong Marcos administration, no? So there's also that aspect. We're not gonna name names, but I won't be surprised some camps are saying, okay, baka matalo kami dito, but if we don't side with the opposition, and we kind of indirectly help Bongbong Marcos, baka may later on bibigyan tayo ng magandang position or something like that, right? Let's just be honest about that. That could be a calculus. There's a fourth element, and the fourth element here is, for instance, this is really clear in the case of Isko. So sabi ni Isko the other day na walang withdrawan at inis pa rin siya doon sa mga pinapa-withdraw siya noon pa lang nung nag-announce si Lenny. At ang hope ni Isko is silent majority will eventually catapult him to the presidency. And he's not totally out of this world because if you look at it, no? If you look at it, ang taas ng second preference numbers ni Isko Moreno, di ba? So if you're Isko Moreno, you're hoping at the last minute, siguro there will be some switching there whereby yung mga iba na siguro more with BBM or Sara will think about him as the most credible candidates. At ito yung sinabi ni Moreno, no? Isko Moreno. Kaya kanina syempre in our little way, kung sakali naman halimbawa mga batang Maynila, nakita namin nilang halimbawang naglingkod ako sa maayos sa hiningi ko na yung tulong nila because we only have about 40 plus days. I do believe Manila represents the entire country in terms of dialect, in terms of culture, in terms of costumes, our Muslim brothers, Filipino, Chinese, Ilocano, Bicolano, Cebuano, Ilonggo, Kapampangan, lahat, Pangasinense, lahat yan nasa Manila. Of course, ang point ni Isko Moreno is he's gonna stick it through. No, he's gonna stick to the race until the end, and still, umaasa siya na the silent majority, yung mga people who see him as second preference, will catapult him to the presidency. So, yon. So, if you look at it, those are the factors. And then I would even add a fifth factor. The fifth factor is this, and this brings me to the second part of our discussion. And I know this is going to be a little bit controversial. The fifth factor is mukhang the chemistry between the Lenny camp and some of the other opposition camp or alternative camps is also not best. And it's not only about Lenny or the team also, it's also about yung mga back and forth between the supporters of different sides. So, and nakikita natin, I mean, for instance, even some of the supporters of Calyodi, for instance, have been facing a lot of criticisms, and yung isa sa kanila, I think nagsulat ng op-ed dyan sa Rappler, nag-trending pa at binash-bash yung bata. Hindi pa nga nag-graduate yan, parang ano lang yan, 19-20 lang yata yung batang yun eh. Or baka 21, ganon. And nakikita natin dito na grabe, no? So, which raises a point, and let me be brutally honest about this, because this is what I tweeted the other day, well, just last night. At sabi ko, these are the 3 ways not to win an elections. First, denialism. Ayan. Attack every data point, every survey, every information na nagsasabi na yung kandidato mo ay not necessarily in the best position. That is denialism. At yung pa, maghanap ka ng kung ano nung ek-ek na analytics or ek-ek na trends para lang gumawa ka ng alternative universe mo. Denialism won't get you elections. Second, elitism. Malaking factor yan. Attack everyone who disagrees with you. not only Bongbong Marcos supporters, but also the other candidates, as there are less X, Y, and Z. So you can fill in the gap, no? And third, repetition. Paulit-ulit yung strategy, narratives na ginamit ng 2010, ginamit ng 2016, ginamit ng 2019, at we know that it has diminishing returns every single election cycle. So if you put all of these things together, that shows you why certain camps are not performing as well as they should. You know, and to be brutally honest about it, there's so many people so excited about Lenny. There's so many people who are passionate supporters of hers. And my sense is if strategy was played better, if the chemistry was better with other camps, if some backdoor negotiations were handled better, if some messaging consistency, the good messaging consistency was sustained, I think Lenny should have been 30% now, 35% now. And please, I mean, I'm not gonna choose Google Trends, whatever, over 6, 7, 8 surveys that suggest quite a different picture. So, wag tayo Now, I'm not saying it's a done deal. I'm not saying that tapos ng laban. I'm not saying that surveys are perfect. As I said, there are many things that surveys also cannot capture. Kasama dyan is yung softness ng soft supporters at bandwagoners. Yes. And yes, it is true that we have mayors in Samar. We have politicians and folks in Mindanao. We have folks even in the north supporting Lenny recently and coming out. That's true, and she's picking up endorsement right and left. But so is Bongbong Marcos picking up endorsements here and there, including from the QZ faction of PDP Laban. And yes, it's true that President Duterte has not endorsed BBM yet, which has provided some opening for pushing for Rosa, Isa, and all of those alternative permutations. But, yun nga eh, ang thing ko kasi dito is, the One Sambayan proposal should have been taken seriously. At nung una pa lang, there should have been a unified ticket. Because the other side, nagkaroon sila ng unified ticket. So we have an imbalanced situation whereby one side has unified ticket. So that's the House of Duterte and House of Marcos. And then the other side, divided along 5, 4, 5, 6 kind of candidates. And the other thing I didn't mention here is also this. It's possible that some of the candidates, if they withdraw, no, actually the numbers could be picked up by Bongbong Marcos, not by Lenny, right? Who's the second, but distant second based on the surveys we see. So there's also the element of that. And then, if mag-withdraw yung ibang candidates, kulang yon. Dapat they actively also promote yung gusto nilang candidate to beat the candidate na pinakaayon nila. So hindi pang pwede na mag-withdraw ka. You have to actively promote the other candidate. And of course, that's a very risky one. Mainis yung mga supporters mo. Tapos kung natalo pa yung manok mo, mainis pa yung next administration. So it's very, very risky. It's very, very risky. Very risky. Kaya nga hindi dapat last minute ginagawa to eh. Ayan talaga. Alam mo, saan yung adults in the room? I mean, we need adults to... Yan ang kulang talaga eh. Wala nga tayong political parties na matino. Wala tayong mediators. Wala tayong interlocutors na na effective. Tapos para mga bata na kahit sino, they're fighting their own fights para lang kaya tayo kung saan tayo. I mean, we are where we are dahil nga ganun eh. In the meantime, at least sa Ukraine, nakita natin yung comedian nila naging presidente, napaka-decisive and all. Habang dito, ayan, may 5 minutes tayo kasi mayroon pa ako isa pang tawag and talk soon. So, may matatanong ba kayo dyan? Ayan. Alam ko, ayaw na mag-star sa akin kasi nag-criticize na ako siguro ng mga favorites niya and all. But this is my job, you know? I mean, hindi ako vlogger lang, you know? I look at it, you know? We have to have real talk. We have to have hard talk. We have to have conversations about some difficult choices and some difficult questions that have to be raised, no? As we enter the final stretch, no? At para sa akin, margins matter. It's just not a matter of who wins or who loses. It's also the margins. Kasi kung malaking margin ang panalo ng isang side, magiging mas kampante sila to push for very radical policies. Kung maging malakas yung margin ng talo ng one side, madedemoralize sila, they cannot act as an effective opposition. So this is not just about who wins, it's also about the margins game. Kaya nga, the next month is also very, very important. I'm not sure it could make as much impact as realignments in March could have made, but it's something that has to be tried. Alright, okay. Ayoko na maging kontrabida. May mga mag-aatake naman sa ito na naman si Daria, nagpo-pontificate, know it all, etc. Well, tama naman ako. Di ba? Anong kasalanan ko? Tama ako. Sinasabi ko yung tama, di ba? At yung ating analysis ay hindi lang base sa nangyari sa ating politika. It's based on comparative analysis. Pinag-aralan po natin na mabuti ng mga issue na yan, di ba? Kaya yan. Kaya good Machiavelli, bad Machiavelli. Ayan, kamusta ka dyan, gang? Salamat kay Marvin for the stars. Ayan na. Iingin na tayo ng mga stars. Alam ko kahit, even if mababash tayo, sige lang, magbigay ka ng stars para medyo makabawi naman tayo dyan. But yeah, I'm just saying, we have to have some real conversation, some serious conversation about compromises that should be undertaken to make this race much more competitive. Otherwise, maging mukhang lang to, extended inauguration in the elections. So, 3 things, denialism, elitism, pinipilit yung hindi gumagana strategy or yung narratives, etc. These are not a recipe for success. I'm sorry. It might give you emotional succor, but it's not gonna give you the power you need in order to effect good change. Yun lang naman talaga sa akin Kaya huwag kayong magalit sa akin. At thank you sa mga nagbigay ng stars. Kahit nagagalit sa akin. Ganun lang naman talaga. Yan pong trabaho natin. Hindi katulad ng ibang vloggers. Sasabihin lang nilang gusto nyo marinig para kuha ng stars, para kuha ng support.